And I think no matter how you really interpret the end, it's clear that Donald Sutherland was killed by his grief.
Hi, this is Matt's Rundown. If you've been enjoying our content, subscribe and hit the like button down below.
On this Top Tuesday, we're going to continue with our review for Don't Look Now, number 98. Don't Look Now is a 1973 film directed by Nicolas Roeg. It is a thriller adapted from the 1971 short story by Daphne de Maurier. It stars Donald Sutherland as John Baxter and Julie Christie as Laura Baxter.
The movie follows John and Laura's grieving process after their daughter dies in an accident. They go to Venice where John is restoring an old church, which is quite beautiful. And they meet two sisters. One of them claims to be a psychic. The psychic claims to be able to see their dead daughter, and their dead daughter is actually trying to warn John of an impending threat. And we follow the movie and kind of get an idea of, what exactly is the threat to John and what's going to happen to John and Laura.
So the major theme of this movie is, of course, death and grief, and how John and Laura come to terms with the death of their daughter and how each of them deal with it in their own separate ways. Laura's very believing in the psychic. She wants to believe her daughter's still there, where John is adamant that there's no such thing. She's dead. She's done. That's it. It's finished. I want to kind of ignore this and move on.
I think it's not that John doesn't believe his daughter exists anymore. He believes she's in heaven or whatever the case may be. He just doesn't believe that the psychics are able to see her on Earth.
Yes.
It's interesting that John doesn't believe in psychics because a lot of the movie he actually sees a lot of foreshadowing. So he is in essence a psychic himself, but he just doesn't believe in it. He even knows that his daughter is basically dead before anyone tells him.
Yeah.
And in the movie, his daughter drowned. So I find it strange that he went to Venice to grieve because it's full of water. A little bit of self-flagellation.
It was a very odd choice on their side, yeah.
I think for him more, because he's the one who pulled her out of the water.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's the one who decided to go to Venice and accepted this job, but it wasn't like in the movie they needed to get it for the money. It felt like they already were well off.
Yeah.
And also felt bad for their son because now they just put him in boarding school and they go off to Venice by themselves. I think the biggest part of the movie really has to do with John's grieving process and the fact that he doesn't grieve. It's almost like his lack of emotional awareness is causing him to see his daughter everywhere. Even though he believes she's not here. And that lack of dealing with the death, of grieving, actually leads to his demise.
Looking at the good, I think the score was very engaging. The filming, the directing, editing, everything was put together very well. It told a good, coherent story that way.
What I really liked is the foreshadowing. They used a lot of colours, particularly the colour red, and glass and water, to let us know that something is going wrong. So it had a little bit of this ominous feeling at times.
Yeah. Both Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland put in stellar performances. Donald Sutherland is definitely the grieving father. He's struggling with it. You can see the difficulty that he has with coming to terms with his daughter's death. You can see Julie Christie trying to connect with him, trying to convince him that she believes her daughter's still with them. And it's very, very solid performances.
Wasn't a fan of the two sisters, though. Their performances were a bit subpar. I think the movie aged really well.
Yeah.
Because the music and the fact that it took place in Venice, the clothes were relatively modern. So you wouldn't necessarily say it's that old. Maybe a little bit from the colour in the movie.
Yeah. And their telephone system.
Yeah. But in general, I think it really did age well. That takes us into the bad, and that goes hand in hand with aging well. I think that the trailer made it look older than what the movie made it feel like.
Yeah.
I don't think the trailer did service to the actual movie.
No, the trailer was nothing compared to the movie.
Yeah. I also felt that the pacing was a bit slow. I got a little bit bored after the first hour.
I think it was very much the sign of the times, though. A lot of those movies are a lot slower. It takes a little bit longer to tell the story because you're trying to give everything enough time. And yeah,
Not used to that anymore.
yeah. Also, it's billed as a thriller, and although they're dealing with a bit of the supernatural, it's not really a scary movie. And I've heard lots of people say it's scary, and they were scared the first time they watched it. There wasn't one stage throughout there that I was like, oh, this could be a bit creepy. It was.
I thought it was creepy. I don't think it was scary. Like with the photo
I
and
think it
stuff.
was
There were
too
stages.
slow to be creepy, unfortunately.
In the beginning, the very first scene was paced well when his daughter died, and that was creepy.
So creepy, not scary.
Yeah. I also didn't quite like the end. So major spoilers. So throughout the movie, there's a serial killer who's dumping bodies in the river of women. And Donald Sutherland's always there, and he tends to see someone in a red coat.
Yeah.
And he sees a red coat person not only at the murder scenes, but all over Venice. And he often chases this person. And I think he thinks it's his daughter almost.
Yeah.
In the end, he once again chases this person with a red coat, like the one his daughter had on when she died. And he ends up getting his throat sliced by a cleaver. And the person holding the cleaver is this dwarf with a red jacket.
Yeah.
And it was just preposterous to me because it just came out of nowhere. And I know some people have interpreted the end of the movie to mean that the dwarf was a serial killer and that he ended up just randomly getting killed by this person. And I didn't like that interpretation at all because it wasn't really signs to me that the serial killer was a dwarf.
Yeah.
And if the police had any inkling and had a bit of a description of the person would have been relatively easy to find. When I saw the ending, I kind of interpreted it almost as if he had a psychotic break. And it was him who was actually killing people. And he chased this woman and she ran away and she was hiding in the corner. And he comes up to her and says, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you." As if that's not what all serial killers say. This poor person who's been chased by him many times had a knife and got scared and killed him. Almost like self-defense. I think it could also be interpreted that neither of them had anything to do with the serial killing that was going on in Venice at the time, and he just happened to chase someone constantly who got a little bit afraid, started carrying a knife, and protected themselves. I can only imagine being chased by someone many times and getting afraid and maybe not having a gun permit and like, okay, I'm going to carry a knife with me. Granted, it was a rather big knife, but still.
Yeah. And I think no matter how you really interpret the end, it's clear that Donald Sutherland was killed by his grief.
Yeah.
Because he's chasing around what he thinks is his daughter purely because he's not really let go yet.
Yeah, he hasn't worked through it. And I know with grief, it's not like one day you suddenly over it. It's something that you carry along with you forever. But one day you do wake up and things do feel a little bit easier. And it's a day-by-day thing. But because he hadn't addressed it, he was constantly plagued by this figure in a red coat that he thought maybe was his daughter. And I think that's quite common, especially in the beginning of the grieving process. You almost wishful and you might actually see the person who died all over the place. But you work through it and you know at a very intellectual level that, you know, that's not possible. But he hasn't come to terms with that, and even though this takes place over an extended period of time, he still runs after her and constantly chasing the same person in the red coat, thinking it's his daughter. So grief killed him in the end. Like you say, it doesn't matter what interpretation you take, it's grief that killed him. I just didn't like the movie reviews and what people were talking about. I felt like this whole, the person was a serial killer all along and he chased the person, they slit his throat, was a bit of a stretch. This person was hiding. There was also no evidence in the movie that this dwarf was the one killing people. So what? She was at the scene. So was Donald Sutherland. So was many other people.
Yeah.
I just... I don't like it when I have to over-interpret the ending of a movie, especially when it has to have this huge stretch.
Yes.
So maybe it's just because I interpreted the movie differently and I don't understand that stretch.
Overall, I can see why this movie made it to the list. It's a very good movie. It's filmed very well. There's a lot of symbolism in it. There's a very good story to it. But because the pacing is so slow, I struggled to connect very well with it. And it became okay.
Yeah, I agree. It was okay. So, okay to me is a 5. Passing, but barely.
And I give it a 5 as well.
So that leaves it with a total of 5. Just in terms of who would enjoy watching it, I think people who enjoy old classic movies will probably enjoy it.
Yeah. So let us know in the comments down below. What's your interpretation of the end?
Bye.
Later.